to the panel to continue highlighting the importance of this work. I want to invite Farhan from XR Bootcamp and Brandon from Meta. Thank you both. I hope it's okay if I stay here for Q&A. I'm just going to grill you about DNA. Just kidding. So the hiring race for top XR talent is reaching a pivotal point. In fact, I remember at LinkedIn, I read a post where I heard that Microsoft is competing with Meta, or some other companies are competing to hire talent. And I think this trend is going to continue because, the Metaverse, the buzzword, behind the buzzword, all these technologies are converging. And now all these companies need that talent. And for me personally, we need to make sure that diversity is also prioritized. So that's why I'm going to continue to have this conversation with the two of the very, the people who have really made it literally their job to make sure that that talent becomes available. Breaking right into it, though, maybe we can start with your introduction and what gives you inspiration to do this kind of work. Sam, Brandon.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you. My name is Brandon Samuel. I am a public policy recruiting manager at Meta. I've been in the recruiting space for the last 12 years. As far as what inspires me, I would say while I'm a candidate activist, I'm also a candidate advocate. So just making sure that I'm helping people to break barriers, break into spaces that they probably weren't able to, just given unconventional backgrounds, et cetera. So that's what inspires me to stay in the recruiting space.
Thank you. And Farhan?
Hello, everyone. Farhan Özkan. We are really proud to be here in this stage announcing this initiative. And it was our dream, as our co-founder mentioned, it was our dream to make education accessible. We are already making it accessible compared to university and college. As Kavya mentioned, it takes a lot of commitment, financially, time to graduate from a college. And we try to bring it as short as 5 months instead of 2-3 years. So we will not stop. We will continue to make it more accessible, and beyond inclusion is actually the most important milestone for us to make it accessible. And we are really proud to be here. And I would love to also give some insights from a talent perspective and from a actually recruiter perspective, since we are dealing with both sides every day, to understand how in such a hiring race and talent hiring programs in place, how you can actually survive as a company, how you can survive as talent. So thanks for inviting us, Kavya, in this panel.
Thanks, Farhan. Let's go right into it. Brandon, so what is the strategy to widen this talent pool? And then how do you find new talent or the untapped resources? How are you making this happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in order to be strategic on my end, I have to work with strategic partners. So the biggest thing for me is just making sure that from a leadership standpoint at Meta, within the Reality Lab space, which is where I'm working primarily, that I'm getting the buy-in of our leadership. And so helping them to understand that a lot of times, especially in a space that's developing, such as XR, we have to base things a lot off of aptitude versus skill. So not looking directly for substantive XR experience, but looking for things that may be transferable, I should say, whether it be product counseling experience or something that's within the developing side, but not necessarily specific to XR. But getting people that are interested and excited about the space, because a lot of times when you invest in them earlier in their careers, the buy-in, the sustainability of that talent is a lot higher.
Interesting. And Farhan, to add to that, anything that you're doing differently at XR Bootcamp?
I mean, we can look at a little bit much more maybe in the big picture. When you look at the exponential growth of the industry, it definitely doesn't match with the talent pool growth. So there's a lot of course, graduates coming from different colleges. But when you look at, are they XR job ready? Unfortunately, no. Because thanks to companies, as you see here, as to Meta and all the companies there, they are updating their software or even releasing hardware in such a speed that it is impossible for a university, college, or any program to really keep up with the curriculum. So that's why these, like the bootcamp program that we created is actually directly fitting to that. We have to update in such a frequent manner, otherwise you cannot make them job ready. So that is the part that we need to act further. How we can, as like I'm actually now a little bit addressing to all platforms here, how we can cooperate together to make our platform be already in the curriculum of boot camps or education right in the day that we update our software, you know? So that is the most important part that we believe that will help the diversity and the talent pool we have, because there are millions of like Unity, Unreal developers out there. So there's no problem in terms of real-time 3D skills. But the situation is how we can make them XR ready and job ready. So that is the part that we can increase our talent pool right tomorrow.
Excellent, and speaks right to your point. The strategic relationships, the partnerships are so important, so we can get that knowledge that is embedded in those softwares. Back to you, Farhan. How do you hire game dev designers in enterprise roles? And then, just for everyone else's benefit, what are the key XR skills that students are looking for right now? So if I were, like when I was looking for cybersecurity, I went on Google, found out these things, but seems like you have like a first-hand knowledge of all this. Maybe something you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have actually unboxing XR Dev Career series that we have get a lot of feedback from like top enterprise companies, game studios. So it's very interesting. Even the developers working on an enterprise XR company, they are sometimes joining, of course, for their professional career and for the next enterprise XR project that they would like to develop. But there's a huge number of people that they have a passion game project on top of the enterprise XR project, that some of them are actually here, that I'm looking at them now. So they are actually having a passion game project, and they would like to build their portfolio with games as well. So there's actually an opportunity for the enterprise XR companies to let their developers to learn, upskill, and build their portfolio with games, but help at the end to the enterprise XR project or platform that they are building on. So in terms of skills, there's not so much difference, but what we have seen as a real distinguishing factor is game industry. As you look at the AAA games, console games, it is way more demanding in terms of skills than enterprise. So enterprise is like a little bit behind in terms of the top-notch real-time 3D skills, but enterprise has its own challenges, like how I can build something on a legacy infrastructure, etc. So each skill is needed, but in a different level. So I recommend anyone here who would like to actually go into the enterprise space, it's quite possible with your game portfolio that you can even find a job today.
Excellent.
And if you don't mind, I want to add something to that, because I think the passion project part is so critical. So obviously, as you all know, XR is something that goes beyond the developing space. So you have so many different facets. So within the policy space, for example, slow down for a second and break it down. So when you think about a review session, when you're thinking about developing, for example, you have legal, you have developers, you have policy, and they're all at the table, and all of them are participating in XR. When you think about XR from a policy lens, you may say, okay, well, this is someone that has to have XR direct experience. But if they have experience doing AR, VR work on a side project, and they haven't done anything that's substantive in the workforce, we can maybe use that transferable project skill to get them in the door within Meta or within any other company. And so being able to basically advocate for yourself and brand yourself is so important. I think we were in a session earlier, I believe her name was Nikita, but it was how to hire XR developers. And one of the things that she said was, looking at things that you can do, things that make you happy, things that excite you, and then putting XR behind that is a good way to advocate and brand for yourself.
That's fantastic, and thanks for that addition. Reminded me of when I was looking for cybersecurity jobs. I applied for every job, even if it needed 5 years experience. I had 8 months, and then I just debated with them that I deserved to be there, and I generally got the job, because passion counts for a lot.
And advocacy as well. Like, you have to advocate for yourself.
Exactly.
There's
No.
someone in this room that I know who we hired for our XR team, and one of the things that she told me, she didn't have a lot of the XR related background, but because she had so much experience in the policy space, because she knew as a woman of color that she was someone that stood out within a room of qualified developers, policy people, legal people, she advocated for a level that was higher, she advocated for comp that was higher, et cetera. So I think that's really important, the fact that you were able to represent yourself to the fullest in any space, because that's necessary in an XR realm, of course.
Totally, Brandon. Totally with you. So going back to Meta just for 1 second, how do you foster companies' growth culture? Because things are changing so fast. How do you nurture that?
It's difficult. Because we're such a large company at this point, I would argue our culture is not homogenous. It's hard to sustain that. So a lot of it is in pockets. Having leaders that are focused and concerned with diversity is important. Within the Reality Lab space, for example, that's something that is a high focal point. So making sure that we have teams that are fostering growth, fostering knowledge around transferable skills. Those are the things that our teams are doing to make sure that they're kind of keeping the community close and keeping it tight. But it is challenging. I think also one of the things that Meta does well, though, we have resource groups, so you're able to learn more about how to advocate for yourself in these different pockets with these different resource groups. So you have sessions around performance time, for example, PSC, so performance summary cycle. We'll have different sessions within the different resource groups, where you learn how to represent yourself in your reviews. You learn how to advocate for your brand when it comes to talking to your manager, and how you basically solicit reviews as well from other leaders, so you can get to the next level, so you can get the guidance that you need. So I would say that's a big part of how we foster like a strong culture around mentorship. One of the other things when you think about performance, developing self and others is a big deal. So that's a big push for me. When I'm looking at people that may not have the substantive experience, I will say to the hiring manager, I'll say to someone that's on that team, this is an opportunity now for you to develop this person into the person that is going to be the premier XR or policy person, right? And so that looks good on your performance as well as theirs. So making sure that everyone understands the part that they play and how it can benefit them, what's in it for me, that kind of mindset. I think that's how our mentorship culture tends to thrive.
Yeah, and I can kind of attest to that. Back in 2016, I was actually working for Meta, back Facebook. It was an interesting time. I was their third-party security advisor, and I have to say, it felt like we were governing an entire country, or maybe more than a few. It kind of was true in some cases. And the one thing that can't be contested, till day, was like one of the best experiences that I had was working there. Even though it was a corporate environment, the respect. And once you work for Meta, like everybody kind of wants your skills, and that's how much kind of a upskilling that can happen with even a brief amount of time. I was there for a year. Super agree with you. So I know that things have really changed with pandemic, and people are moving remote, and I know Meta is committed to remote work. So I want to ask both of you, what advice, Farhan, first you have for remote workers, and how can people maintain their processes? Because a lot of the staff is remote, and some of this XR work makes it even sort of easier but complicated. So what advice do you have? And then I want to ask you, Brandon, the same question.
Yeah, it's a very nice question. Actually, we have a history of 6-7 years in terms of democratization of VR/AR, but the XR Bootcamp as a program, it started exactly with the pandemic. So we started with like a remote first operations, let's say, and keep in mind, like, people have less interaction with the with the other colleague or peers, right? They need this kind of like interactive cohorts and environments much more than before. And it even affects the education system right now, that when you look at colleges, when you are considering that some of them are remote already, so it's not easy from that standpoint. So what we have actually somehow cracked the code is we simulate the typical remote XR studio. How does it work? Actually, all our pitch sessions, stand-up sessions, even our like daily check-ins, everything is happening in VR. So even though you are learning like real-time 3D Unity, you are still coming to the VR session every day. And it's very interesting, like we were also trying with Zoom as well, and the accountability of the students that they need to deliver every week is way, way beyond than the normal online Zoom related sessions. So, because when you see someone in person in the same classroom, it really gives you enough responsibility at the end. And we want to really bring that. We have sprint sessions, we have like daily stand-ups, and everything is happening in remote and in VR. So we recommend everyone to actually interact with others as well. The critical thing that we have actually received from the companies, they lack a little bit of interaction after lockdown, and they send their employees to our advanced programs, and they can interact with their peers, maybe not in the same company, but with other companies, but who is working on hand tracking, optimization, you know. So this is actually an amazing opportunity that you are not in your bubble anymore, using remote as an opportunity. So that's what we found as a solution, and it works so far.
It's a challenge, right, Brandon? So how are you guys dealing with it?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but I think one of the beauties of Reality Labs is Portal. So our Facebook portal, a lot of us use that in order to communicate for all of our meetings. So I would say for the most part, you find that a lot of teams meet with the camera on. So you're still interacting, you're in these group settings, and you're still having that opportunity to have the dialogue, and the accountability is there because the video is on. So it's not necessarily in the most traditional sense, but the world is not as traditional as it once was, right? So I think people are learning how to navigate that and are also kind of bending and adhering to the times. And so I think if you're able to find your tribe and then also build that brand for yourself as well, it's not as challenging as I think it may have been if it were maybe even 2018 or 2019. For example, I started at Meta in 2020, so it was right before the pandemic started. And so I can honestly say I don't think it hindered my development at all, because I was able to still navigate relationships because of all of the camera on interaction. And I think a lot of team members within the Reality Lab space as well have watched people grow professionally, move up levels, all in a virtual space. So I think we as a leadership team and as a company overall is fostering a space that is inclusive of all locations and geographical spaces.
And I hope that extends to the extended reality too, because you're now really pushing towards training people in VR as well. That's fantastic. Last questions, and then I just want to give everybody a chance to, if you have any questions for any of us. What are the challenges of hiring experienced and diverse? Like experienced, really difficult, people have a lot of options when they are really experienced. And then on top of that, you're trying to diversify the team. So how do you deal with this particular challenge? Just to kind of also bring about, this seems like a very, step in the right direction. What else is, available to use there?
So hiring experienced talent is definitely more challenging. Especially when you think about it from the XR, AR, VR lens, because, like I said before, most people aren't coming ready-made with that XR background. So it requires a lot more influencing. It's not impossible, but it requires a lot more influencing. It also requires a lot more digging into what that person's level of agility is. what that person's level of comfort is when it comes to managing projects, because a lot of the things from a substantive standpoint can be taught. But if you have someone that has that level of strategy, tact, ability to influence decision, ability to communicate well with executives, as long as you have those, you can teach the XR stuff later. And I think our team does a really good job of that, where when we hire people that are at the higher levels, we're not under-leveling them because they lack the XR space. We're keeping them where they're supposed to be and just realizing that we have a responsibility to develop them, especially for diverse talent. We have a responsibility to develop them, put them in spaces where they can succeed, and giving them the proper foundation. And I think we do a really good job of that within the Reality Lab space for sure.
Definitely. How about you, Farhan? Any tips for?
I mean, companies are coming to us because they need something fast, onboarding, fast tracking, upskilling. So when we see this kind of situation, as Brandon mentioned, actually it's all about creating a diverse team is not like a one-day thing, right? So it's like taking time. And the thing that maybe sometimes we have to remind ourselves more is it's also a continuous thing. So it's not like, okay, I need the percentages are not enough. Let me find a diverse team member. It's not like that, right? You can find one, you can find 5, but if you want to bring 100 diverse people, you need to create a pipeline, right? So that is the part that I think we need to act together and fast. That is the part that I believe that will be more valuable than trying to find quickly a diverse talent in one day. I think, and maybe pay a lot of like budget or thing to hiring managers or headhunters. I think if we can dig, as Brandon mentioned, but not in the traditional ways that, okay, let me go to software engineering graduates, right? Let me find them in the top colleges. Maybe we should dig into, I know, like people working on physics, mathematics, engineer, right? So to be honest, we have proven that it is not so different to upskill a person from a software engineer or a software engineering background or a person from a mathematics or STEM background. It is exactly the same. It only matters how much that they can commit. So we actually, I mean, if anyone would like to apply to our programs, I have to warn you that we have the most challenging upskilling journeys that you can ever have, because having a job is also not easy as well, because the jobs are demanding as well, right? But we somehow cracked the code for 4 months. So you have to, even though you have a full-time job, you can take it, but we have to make sure that you fail fast in a supervised environment. You build your own portfolio project in a supervised environment. So this is something that we believe, like how we can transform an engineer to an XR space. And from my perspective, if you ask me, I'm doing like mentorship and career mentorship almost like 2-3 times a day. And I'm always telling, if you have a subject matter expertise on anything, medical, engineering, believe me, you will be way ahead of any software engineer or any XR engineer out there working for the very long time. Because these are the people that companies, especially enterprise companies, needs today, and they have difficulty on finding, because they are working on, let's say, energy, right? If you are already working on this sector and have XR skills, like there's no chance that you will not get hired in a couple of months. So that's what we believe. So how we can bring people from other subject matter expertise to XR.
Yeah, Brendan?
And one other thing that I'll say to that, because from a diverse pipeline standpoint and building that, that's amazing, but then the inclusion standpoint is also critical. So yeah. It takes so much work to find this diverse talent. We have to make sure that we're doing the things necessary to keep them as well. So the mentorship aspect that you talked about before, that's key. I think Meta has a good thing going right now, because we've increased a lot of our diversity numbers significantly in the last year or two. But I think the biggest thing is just making sure that we're keeping a sustainable environment as well, an environment that people want to come as far as diverse talent, because word of mouth is the biggest thing. bad news travels fast. So if we aren't doing the things that are appropriate to foster a culture that's inclusive, people are going to leave. So I think for any company that is looking to increase their diversity numbers, like just make sure that you're also doing things to keep that talent, making sure that you are mentoring them, having those daily conversations about what their career goals, what they want for progression. It's not just about getting the number, because that doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. It's about getting those people to leadership, getting them to places where they're willing to invest in you, invest in your company, and then also invest in talent that's continuing to come in the door.
That's so fantastic, and it's so inspiring. Anybody who thinks that a hairstylist can't be a badass cybersecurity ninja or something, well, I'm here, and I have like at least 15, 16 awards to prove for it. But it's really encouraging to hear that it's so true for XR as well. A nurse can be an XR developer. Like, these guys are literally turning people into superheroes that extend reality into other dimensions. So like, talk to them. It's so encouraging and so validating to hear from both of these leaders. And I just want to open up for questions for anyone who want to ask any questions related to this topic.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this panel and everything. I'd love to ask, how can we support people who have disabilities, who may not be able to use a lot of the XR software as it stands, in getting into these XR jobs and opportunities?
It's a very, very important question. Brandon, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so neurodiversity is something that I know is very important for us, and also just like the disabled or differently abled space in general. I think as an organization, Meta is one of those places that is offering a lot of different types of opportunities, and XR is developing, so I don't think that we have fully calibrated on a lot of that yet, but it's a work in progress. I would say ask us again in maybe a year and see what the response is there.
I do know that XRSI had advised with the policy team about developer checklist. So like literally we work very closely. For people who raise eyebrows about that, I'm sorry, but this is the way you change systems. You really have to strategically partner and call out very, very granular things. So CyberXR had put together top 7 accessibility consideration. We talked to the policy team. We're like, hey, can you put this in the hands of developers? They got together with XRA and put out an Oculus accessibility checklist. We have a medical XR council whose lead is this amazing woman whose half body doesn't work because she has multiple sclerosis. Yet she showed up on some of these panels, and we realized like, oh my God, we have to make this thing work with one hand. So like lived experiences, these strategic collaboration that are happening behind the scene, I don't care if people raise eyebrows, for good cause, I will work with anybody, and especially for accessibility. So I think those, again, equitable measures. We really have to go with beyond inclusion and just like really extend our hands to the people who are able to bring those lived experiences. And that's the intention with all this programming that has gone into beyond inclusion, is to make that happen.
One thing maybe I can add as well. Again, it comes down to, is our XR education accessible? Because first, you need to educate them. I mean, probably they have some background, but they may want a little bit much more upskilling, right? So I think creating remote programs that they can even represent themselves with avatar in this education. And then, of course, companies like Meta, they will get hired after a portfolio, and no other company will look at any other disability or anything, right? So if they can create their portfolio in a way, then stage is theirs, so they will definitely find job. But on another perspective, we are seeing accessibility as a very nice innovative challenge. Our portfolio, we are actually encouraging our students to create something accessible or use one of the disability as a feature that you can actually enhance. So one of our, we have actually a booth at 6:08 tomorrow. We would love to invite you there as well. One of our trainers, they have been awarded many times with best game, best indicators. They actually, they have one of the most sophisticated hand tracking games, hand physics lab. on Quest Store, and they somehow manage to, if you have a missing finger, that you can still play the game, you know? So you can actually calibrate based on the missing finger. So this was a challenge for them that they have to address. It doesn't mean that how much additional revenue that they will gain, but this was a challenge for them because they are doing that to overcome this challenge rather than, okay, let me monetize this way, you know? I think we should really look at the AAA gaming industry. They have done an amazing job for the last maybe 2-3 years. So I think we have a lot of things to learn from a AAA game industry.
Thank you for that question. And there is one more question.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say again, this is a really exciting conversation. So thank you for creating the space to have these conversations. I teach at the University of Maryland's Immersive Media Design program.
Thanks.
And one of the sort of founding principles that we work with is taking students that are coming from computer science backgrounds and from art design backgrounds and cross-training them so that they have their individual track, but they're really learning diverse set of points of view inside a collaborative team. And do you find, especially like at large companies like Meta or the companies that you're working with that are hiring, and they're larger companies where usually you're seeing people come in and do a very specific job, that those cross-disciplinary skills are helpful so that if you're somebody coming on the design team and you have an understanding of where the developers are coming from, or vice versa, that is helpful for people coming into those kind of entry-level positions?
I would say it's absolutely helpful. I think it's one of those things, though, from a recruiting standpoint, we have an obligation as the recruiter to make sure that we're properly advocating for that type of candidate, because it's more of a unconventional background, or one that's more mixed, I would say. And so seeing or making sure that I'm able to advocate and say where that person can fall, and helping the hiring manager, who may not necessarily be used to seeing the more unconventional background, help them to understand where those different things can work in that space. Also, when it comes to prepping that candidate now for interviews, I also have a responsibility to make sure that I am pushing them to articulate the right experience for the right conversations. So I think it's one of those things. It's helpful for them to have that background, but it's a requirement and it's necessary from the recruiting standpoint for us to make sure that we're articulating that background appropriately.
Yeah, and we should definitely talk. Maverick is one of the programs. We have like Sammy, who is our volunteer, and we're looking to socialize with you the Beyond Inclusion, get some of your students involved.
One thing that I can add, I think we have also organizers of MIT Reality Hack here. I think hackathons are probably, you are also organizing, I think one of the top possibilities that you can match different disciplines, right? And what we are doing in part of Beyond Inclusion program, actually, our 4 months program, the third month you are prototyping by yourself. Every week you have one prototype based on the use case that you are selecting. You are all alone, of course in a supervised level, but we want you to be self-capable. So regarding your question, we believe the industry right now is not mature enough that you can afford a designer or different backgrounds without at least basic prototyping skills. When I say prototyping, a little bit of Unity scripting or Unreal, so to make sure that they can actually realize their ideas. That's very important. But in the 4th month, we are actually making people form teams that, as you mentioned, their different backgrounds stand out, because now they are actually joining forces to create an MVP out of one of the prototypes that they have built. So that's definitely the right way. I think more hackathons, more like these kind of MVP projects will be the perfect path towards that. But at least with the enough prototyping skills for any degree, any discipline first.
Yeah. And if there are any students in this room, please know, like for the first year in my cybersecurity class, I just sat there and I thought one day it will all make sense. It was so intense. I didn't know what the hell is an IP address going in, but like everything changed over time.
I mean, we are also very happy. Recently, we have one student, zero coding experience, zero VR development experience, and she started program last year, and she just found a job like as a junior technical artist on one of the top Quest game studios, and like we cannot even believe how this happened, but it's happening. As I mentioned, like the portfolio is the critical thing, and they get like salaries like 80, 90K even. Like you don't underestimate that you don't know coding. It is not like a actually problem as long as you have other diverse skills. So as long as you have, again, scripting and prototyping skill as a base.
Exactly. And through this program, we're going beyond. So that's really the major, it's upon us to create your success story. So use us. That's what we're here for. That's why we are collaborating so closely. So we don't just like, hey, you did your boot camp and that's it. No, we'll really help you. And at the end, I just want to thank you both. Any last words or any inspiration thoughts or anything that comes to your mind as we leave for the day?
Yeah, I would say, as far as last words, just making sure to advocate for yourself. When you're in your interviews, for anyone that's interviewing for jobs within the XR space or any space, I think adjective usage is so important. So making sure that you're talking from a lens of, I created this, I developed this, I implemented this. Making sure that you're showing yourself as a subject matter expert in whatever you're interviewing for is key. Because I think that's a big way to make sure, and also being excited about what you're doing. I think there are a lot of people in the back that I've spoken to, I've recruited, and the level of excitement that they've had, in addition to the substantive knowledge that they had, it went leaps and bounds, and that's why they're here today. So I would say advocate for yourself, making sure that you show your excitement and show your passion for the space, because it's a space that we need people, but we need you to be really excited about it as well.
Wonderful. Ron?
I really want everyone here to mark this day, today, as a really important day, because we will test the industry if we succeed to become diverse. The hiring race is really crazy right now. And we have to find not only diverse talent pools, but we have to also survive with that talent, right? Especially when you look at, we haven't maybe talked so much, but from a medium or small size XR studio perspective, future may not be as today. It may be much more challenging when you are trying to retain your talent, right? So you have to be inclusive. You have to maybe provide some side benefits, like 4 days a week working days, or in terms of different side benefits. So you have to make sure that you keep your talent diverse and be working with you. So we would be here to help you as much as we can, funneling this talent, diverse talent, but there are a lot of partners out there that we want to work with. So if you know any of these partners, it can be a college who can maybe bring their talents, or grads, or it can be like platforms. Please match with us. We would love to bring them to this talent funnel program. Believe me, not only talents, but also the industry will win. I hope that we will work with every one of you in the next year. Thank you
So much. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And really, let's go beyond inclusion and, make some equity happen. Let's be part of this revolution, this movement. And I would say, I agree with Farhan. Let's mark this day as the effort that started. And let's hope that we challenge the industry and change the numbers and create more inclusion in the industry. Thank you so much.